Thank you for tuning into the Radicards podcast on radicards.com. I'm your host, Patrick Greeno, and today I have with us Ryan Daly joining us again for this episode. And today we're going to be talking about some things happening in sports and some things happening in the hobby. So, Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. Happy 2019.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, happy 2019 to you too. Gosh, seems like time just flies right by us, dude. It's crazy. It feels like yesterday. I was like walking into my first day at work at a job in 2010. Now it's 2019. Where does the time go? That's the question. That's the real question here.
Yeah.
So today on Deep Thoughts with Radicards.com. Okay, so right into it here. Kiyoshi Kimura, who owns a series of sushi franchises, I think, he bought a 612-pound tuna for $3.1 million. And it's thought that the price correlates more to a PR stunt. At least that's what Darren Rovell was like that's his prediction.
Mm-hmm.
Less so than trying to make a profit off of the tuna, because I think Darren was saying that to try to make a profit, you have to sell the rolls for like three figures, like 130 to 150 bucks a roll to make any money. So I'm like, gosh, it's interesting to do that, but if you have that kind of discretion, $158 per roll to make a penny, according to this tweet by Darren Rovell.
Yeah. When you first showed this to me, I thought this was like a famous Japanese baseball player that was,
yeah, right,
forking over some big coin for some tuna. But then I read into it, and he's the supposed king of tuna.
He's the guy. He's the tuna guy.
Which is a pretty cool title to have. So I guess if there's a big tuna out there, the king of tuna has to buy it. So he probably overpaid, but he's the king, so he can do what he wants.
I think that the PR thing is fine. If you can swing that kind of thing financially and you want to get some eyeballs on what you're doing, this kind of thing is a very good, fast, efficient way to do that. And so I think it's kind of cool. Now, if I caught this tuna, or if I bought this tuna and say didn't need it for resale, maybe I stuff it and put it like over my fireplace or something. I'm trying to think like different uses of the tuna besides cutting it up and serving it in sushi, which is delicious, by the way. But yeah, I think it's kind of cool. 612 pounds are huge tuna. I mean, just gigantic. So
yeah, they're amazing animals, and one of the best. If you're not into sushi and you want to get into it, I think the different types of tuna are a great place to start. I remember the first time I had tuna when I was 15 or 16. I was so stupid. I thought that they would be putting like canned tuna on to some rice.
Canned tuna and
I didn't
rice.
realize it was it was an actual like fresh cut from the fish. It wasn't the shitty canned stuff.
Isn't tuna a mammal? You said,
oh, I'm awful with this stuff.
So, okay, we know that whales are mammals, right? But, and I'm a tuna's Wikipedia page. I think about that and I'm like, well, okay.
They're huge fish. They're at the top of the food chain.
They're gigantic. They're very, very large. And so let me tell you something. Speaking of food, which I don't know if you've ever had food before, but it's amazing. So like for me, when I make a dish I used to make in LA was I'd cook a pasta dish. I'd like boil pasta, and then I would put a can of tuna. I'd like drain it all out or whatever and make it's like dry. And I'd put a can of tuna in there, and then olive oil and some salt and pepper and some basil and maybe some jalapenos or something, or banana peppers or something. And then that would make for a really nice, healthy, energy-rich meal. And then I'd go skateboarding, and I'd have enough energy to like skate for like 2 hours off of that, which is great. It's not something you'd want to eat and then just like take a nap. You'd like want to use that energy. But I remember though enjoying that meal because it's so flavorful and rich and very
Yes.
energy rich in that way. So I appreciated that. Man, we are way off topic. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't mean to downplay how good canned tuna can be, because canned tuna is super cheap, very healthy, and if you prepare it correctly, it can be very delicious. Same goes for sardines, etc. But when you buy sushi in a fine, or when you buy tuna in a fine sushi house, it is quite different from the canned experience. Um, so
It's really good.
good for the king of tuna. I would love to buy some sushi from him if I'm ever in Japan. I wonder.
Mail order. You know?
Oh,
Mail order sushi.
yeah.
Expect 2 to 4 weeks for delivery.
Oof. It'll be fresh. It's fine.
Right. So moving on here, Sidney Crosby experienced a bit of, I guess they call it in hockey, it's called chirping, which in baseball it's like, was it heckling? In like comedy, it's called heckling.
Chirping. Yeah, I've heard a couple different things throughout the different
They're like
sports.
synonyms or whatever, right? So essentially,
Yeah.
somebody in the crowd giving Sidney Crosby a hard time throughout a game, and Sidney Crosby responded in a very, I think, professional way. You know,
Absolutely.
after the game was over, he signed a hockey stick and wrote and scribed on it. You know, he basically said, what did he say? He says, "Yeah, good chirps. Take it easy on me next time!" Exclamation mark.
Yeah.
And then he signed it, and then he gave it to the guy that was heckling him. I thought that was like, I mean, that's pretty cool. Like, really classy behavior. Not making a scene. Just like, you know, being the responsible professional that he is. And I found that quite encouraging. I mean, I wouldn't. It's not encouraging me to heckle Sidney Crosby. It's just encouraging to know that people like that exist, and then we can be better versions of ourselves when people give us a hard time for one reason or another. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard some awful things shouted at athletes over the years, and it's amazing that they can just kind of block everything out and focus on what they're trying to do. But super cool, Sidney Crosby, who's like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, hockey player on earth right now. So he didn't have to do that at all. He could have just walked away, but he didn't. So
this is really nice of him. Ryan, you want to take on this next piece here?
Sure. Yeah. So the baseball news has been fairly slow as everyone's sort of waiting for the big free agents to make their decisions before spring training. But Yusei Kikuchi did sign with the Mariners, which he's sort of the next Japanese phenom to come over after seeing Shohei Ohtani last year. Kikuchi didn't come over with as much fanfare as Ohtani because Kikuchi is just a pitcher, unlike Ohtani, who's the two-way star. Kikuchi is a little older, but he's very talented, one of the best pitchers in Japan. He'll get a chance to play with arguably the most legendary Japanese baseball player in Ichiro Suzuki, who's still technically on the Mariners roster. So that'll be fun to watch. He's a big left-handed pitcher, looks very promising. And he'll get, because the Mariners are in the same division as the Angels, he'll get to pitch against Shohei Ohtani at least a couple times. And as Ohtani is recovering from his Tommy John surgery, 2019 will only see him hit. So it'll be a lot of Kikuchi Ohtani matchups, which will be tons of fun.
I wonder if Ohtani knows him, like from the his baseball days. Like, hey man, how's it going?
I imagine they must know each other to some extent. And the other sort of interesting layer to this is that Kikuchi is a left-handed pitcher, and one of the knocks against Ohtani as he was developing in the MLB is that he was not good at hitting left-handed pitchers. He had a couple bright spots against left-handed pitching last year, so it'll be interesting to see how these two sort of match up, because in theory, Kikuchi sort of has the upper hand here, but I don't know. We'll see.
That'll be interesting, man. I hope that we'll get to see some interesting matchups with the new left-handed pitcher. Now, it's my understanding that they're pulling him up to the pro level, right? It's not just like, hey, we're going to put you in AAA and to like develop, and then we'll bring you up in 2020.
Yeah, that's my understanding too.
Okay.
And the Mariners are sort of in a semi-rebuilding mode. They shipped off some of their big contracts. They shipped off Robinson Cano. So I think they obviously want Kikuchi to sort of step up and claim his role in the organization. So I think he'll be on the starting roster for sure, day one.
That's really great. I just want to update everybody. A tuna is actually a fish. Okay.
Not a mammal.
I'm just doing some research here as we're talking, and it looks like the general consensus is that tunas are fish. So I know everybody was just waiting to hear the news on that during this podcast. I know people are tuning in specifically for our fish talk, and so just wanted to cover that. I think that's an important thing to discuss.
This is breaking news.
This is, we talk about the edgy topics, and that's important. All right, so let's move on here. The other day I was cleaning out my office, one of my bookshelves, and I've got a bunch of catalogs. I'd gotten like REA and just some auction house catalogs. Cool stuff. Nice to reference them from time to time. Trying to figure out what to do with them. Some of them are really thick and heavy, and others are like, pamphlet style. They're like, I don't know, 50, 60 pages, like smaller, quite a bit smaller. And so the question I had is, do we keep these or trash them? And like trash them, recycle because they're paper, but what do we do? See, the reason why I asked this is because if, as a blogger, content producer, I like to grab stuff and credit stuff from online sources. So if I needed something from REA, I go to REA.com or whatever, and go to their website, and then I'd grab the image or whatever it is, and then credit it on my blog if I'm using it. I can't do that with physical catalogs, and I'm not one to make like collages and stuff to hang up on walls. I've outgrown that, but these books, these volumes, I mean, they're nice. They're nice, but they're dense. They take up a lot of space. So, if I get rid of them, how long should I wait? And so I think about, there's certain catalogs I get, and within a couple of weeks I throw them in the recycle bin. I'm on like a mailing list or whatever, distribution list. But the ones that I get that are dense and big and they're mailed to me, the question becomes, how long do I keep them on file before I put them in the recycle bin? Because there's a difference between like a novel about baseball and then a catalog selling product. That's all this stuff's archived on these websites associated with the catalogs, right? So
sure,
like not this isn't a rhetorical question. It's like, really, if you have catalogs, what do you do with them, Ryan?
Yeah, I would. For me personally, I've gotten rid of almost all of my catalogs.
You have. Yeah.
However, because eBay sold listings only go so far,
right?
And there are other resources online where you can find out sold listings, but some of those you have to pay for it. It's a little more difficult. So it is nice to have like a quick and dirty reference. Just if you have something that's kind of esoteric and rare, and you can't find it online, and you have no idea sort of what it's worth. The hard copy catalogs are fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, most of like I said, the companies that produce these catalogs, all of them, most if not all of them, have websites where all of this data is archived. So then it kind of antiquates like the action of pulling a book off a shelf and going through the catalog on one page at a time looking for whatever, when you could just go into and do it all from your fingertips on your phone or on your keyboard at home. So I just wonder, like, if I have access to digital content that I can use for blogging or whatever else, after a while, having the tangible item is just kind of loses its value, right? Like,
yeah,
you can enjoy it for a month or 2 months, and then after that, it's now it's like the online archives are more valuable to me than the physical, tangible
yes, definitely
books. So,
and we're both musicians, and we both remember a time when you could get like Musician's Friend and Sweetwater and all these cool catalogs shipped to your house.
Yeah,
and that was really like the main conduit to finding out about products that weren't in your local music store. So, but now that's really, like you said, it's sort of antiquated. and I held on to those mostly for nostalgic purposes
Sure.
for a long time, but I those things hit the recycle bin pretty hard about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, like
Um,
Musician's Friend was one that I used to keep for at least a year before I'd toss it. I mean, the ones you'd
mhm,
mentioned I've had, like, so I've had a lot of catalogs of various things and come through my own personal ethos. So like things just they end up in my lap and I read them and then I kind of just set them aside. And then after a while, I'm like, well, the stack is getting pretty tall. I should probably purge some of this stack. So,
mhm.
um, whatever the case, I think what if you're gonna get rid of them, put them in the recycle bin, or if you really want to be kind of useful in a way like beyond the recycling is if you do like a donation at like a YMCA ever, add those to the donation pile and be like, hey, yeah, these are some catalogs, kind of cool stuff. People want to like reference or get to know some of the companies that sell this stuff. That is, I think, even more valuable if you can find a way to repurpose them that way to get some of
Hmm.
the young kids into the card market. So I just wanted to touch on that because it's something that we all kind of battle is like magazine subscriptions and catalogs, like the stuff that comes in the mail. How long do we hang on to it? Because magazines don't really have they don't have an appreciation value. It's very linear. Like you pay $3.99 this year, and 20 years, a magazine will still be worth about $3.99 because
Mhm.
it's worth the value of the paper it's printed on. Now we're talking about modern stuff, not like vintage 50s, 60s, 70s, like that era. Like Sports Illustrated #1 is the first issue is still valuable. The first Beckett, like that was printed in '84, that still has value. So there's there's value in some of this stuff, but for the most part, the stuff that comes through our you know possession, a lot of this modern stuff just is it's just stuff. So you enjoy it for what it is, and you just kind of move on. So I just want to touch on that. Um, Moving on here, so price guides. Let's talk about that. Um, Now in the current market, we you know we go off of values from eBay completed sold listings, right?
Mhm.
Not every sold listing is going to reflect the current market, right? Because if someone lists something for, say, like that Paul Goldschmidt Auto orange refractor, that was sold immediately, but it didn't reflect actual market value. Actual market
Right.
value for that is like $8,000.
Yeah, that was an anomaly.
Yeah, but if you set something up auction style and it's listed correctly, as in the stuff's titled correctly, then the market has a chance to, and it's listed at the right time. It'll end at the right time. It gives the market a chance to really bid and create a situation that will produce an outcome that will reflect actual market value. At least the probability of such will be much higher in that capacity, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So printed price guides, they have kind of lost their value. I'd say like 20 years ago, they sort of like fell off, like as when eBay started to pick up. eBay was created in '95, it started to pick up in '98. Now it's like as big as it is ever now. So, but by '98, you started to see like card shows sort of drop off. People subscribing less to Beckett Media, the monthly publication. So, you know, there are certain times when referencing a price guide, a printed one, is valuable for information. Not so much pricing information, but like actual description information, like product identification information, that kind of thing. So like the big book, the almanac that Beckett produces once a year, that's actually a pretty valuable resource for that reason. Same with the SCD, the standard catalog.
Mhm.
That's a really good one too. I like to have both of those in my library, which I do
Yeah.
have. The last time I bought an annual from Beckett was 2010, and then SCD in 2011. So I have still those books. So they're not updated to current, obviously, but the stuff in them is still very valuable to me if I ever want to get like more information on something. There's always a little description talking about this card. They might have like insertion ratios. That to me is way more valuable than any pricing information that Beckett could provide me. So a part of me feels
Sure.
like these printed price guide, the companies that produce them should just focus on information, identification information. Just have little blocks of text talking about the product, and then
Mhm.
leave the pricing up to like VCP and eBay completed solds and WorthPoint and everything else, and just let the market kind of like absorb identification information. So the question that I said that I have a post here on the podcast is, when does it make sense to buy a current price guide And when does it make sense to buy a back issue of a price guide? That's the
Mm.
question.
Yeah, I would just if you don't have one already sitting around, would you agree that you should just buy one like as soon as possible, just to have just to have the most recent price guide? Because if you go to shows, you go to hobby shops. I mean, people that run tables at shows and people that run hobby shops, they have these things floating around, and they do reference them. So there is some value to sort of know like what the price points are in
Right.
these sort of catalogs.
So here's my answer to that. There's a couple of different ways to go about this. Okay. Okay. The first thing comes to mind. I don't buy the latest version because in a year it won't be the latest version anymore. And if I keep them for say like 9 years, there's no sense in buying the latest version. But
So
unless
do you try and save money and buy older versions?
you don't have to save money when you're buying older versions. Let me give you a perfect example.
Okay.
There's a coin price guide that's like a book. It's like 750 pages. And it's just for coins. And the current one is like say $30, but the one from 2017 is $9. And you go further back, it's cheaper. But how much do the coin prices really change that much in a couple of years? It hasn't really been that long a time. Granted, my 2010 annual Beckett, the prices are way out of date. Like Strasbourg stuff doesn't sell what it did back in 2010, and so I understand that, but I'm not using it for pricing. I'm using it for information. So if you just want something from information and you don't need the latest one because you're not buying Bowman Chrome every year, you're buying like vintage stuff all the time, and you're looking for say your type collector. I mean, this is going to be very situation specific based on the type of collector that you are. So for price guides, I think that like the most recent one I would buy would be the one that's 2 years old from now. So for me, it would be the 2017. If I were to update my 2010, I would get the 2017 version. But really, if you want to find, you get into yourself in a situation where you can get the latest one for pretty cheap. If you go to the National, wait till the last day and go to the Beckett booth, sometimes you might get yourself in a situation where they want to sell you one at a bargain because they don't want to take it back with them because those books are pretty heavy. So
Sure.
there's that situation. But if you don't find yourself at the National, which is a pretty expensive endeavor, 2 years out I think is fine if you don't want to buy the latest one, but you want one that's affordable and still has relatively accurate information in it. Information will be not dissimilar from one older than that, but the pricing information obviously is going to be changing, or at least that's the expectation anyway. I can't imagine they're updating those prices. It's like a 1,000-page book every single year, so it's a lot of bandwidth, manpower. But 2 years I think is fair for me. I'm looking at something 2 years old. Like if I got the coin price guide, it would be like the 2017 for $9 instead of the modern one for 30. So that's just kind of how I would be dealing with back issues. With modern current stuff, if I were buying modern every single year, it would probably make a lot more sense for me to buy the latest example of the book, right? And just have it on the shelf for, like me, I still have my 2010 on my bookshelf. It's still part of my library, and it will stay there. Because I don't really have intentions on updating a new book anytime soon, which it might not be a bad idea to do that, but it's not mission critical priority at this time. So
Sure.
What about you?
And I've heard from some collectors that donate a significant portion of their collection to charity, they will use price guides as a nice reference for the tax write-off that you can get from that. So that's another potential positive thing of having a price guide around. So you can say, I donated, X amount of cards from this set, and according to this price guide, they're worth this much. So that's how much I'm going to write off. That's an interesting sort of use for the price guide. I don't really donate enough to necessitate that kind of detail. But if that's something that you do, I would certainly reference the price guide and their prices in that scenario.
Sure. Other uses for the price guides is that, and this would make sense for the one of the bigger annual books, because Beckett doesn't just produce the big annual Bible type book. They also have this like other version of the book that's like more abridged, that's much thicker than the monthly. I've got one of those too that was given to me, And so it's less information, less to carry around. But if you're a set builder and you go to a show and you want a checklist, I've seen guys print stuff off and make their own binders, and they carry that around and check things off as they go. That's fine. And then other guys I've seen carry these books around with them, and they just highlight as they go. So that's like the information's already built into the book. It prevents you from making your own book. So I found that in that situation, it makes a lot of sense to have a book available to you. So just another pro of getting one of the annuals into the library. Just kind of like when I think about this, because I value price guides not for their values, but for the information. I value them. I do. And here's the other point too: is that if you have been looking for something for so long and you don't have a reference point for value, like say an $89 Donruss Blue Chips card, or some old obscure Venezuelan thing you haven't never seen as an example. We were talking about the Nolan Ryan last night, Ryan, you and I, and
72.
So we talk about certain really kind of obscure, rare, it's almost like mythic rare type stuff. And if you don't have a reference point for value, it does help to have some semblance of value somewhere printed or found online if you can. If it's not found online and it is in print, that's where you can start a conversation. Well, Beckett says it's worth $1,300, but in the actual market, I expect this to close at around $600 to $700. Because we don't have a reference point, how about we settle at $900? Like these are the kinds of conversations that I would expect to have. And how badly I want the card and my buying power at the time, I might be willing to pay something at face value. I like to think about things as ranges, like values and ranges, because there's never any hard, idealistic price point. This is always going to be $1,500. Like there's always, like a certain car might be, well, the range in that is $1,300 to $1,600. Like all the instances I've seen this sell have been between that, give or take about $150. So I kind of see these ranges and I think, well, okay, I base the range. I look at the range and I think, all right, let's base it off of, let's couple that with the quality, condition, edges, surface, are the printing flaws, or, what do the corners look like? What's the registration look like? And just kind of, play with that a little bit. And you can come up with a price point that makes sense for a negotiation or a counter offer or something like that. So price guides have value, even though we have so much access to recorded sales online.
Yeah, but and like you said, there's been some times where myself, and I'm sure you've encountered this as well, but if you go on eBay or you go on to whatever other online retailer that you find cards on and you type in a card and there's no results.
Yeah.
It's just not there.
Right.
And it's obviously a rare card that you're looking for, which is great. But that's where the price guide sort of comes into hand, because you have like this sort of all-encompassing point of reference to where, obviously, like you said, it's not necessarily what you could sell the card for or what you're going to pay for the card. But it's a starting point at the very least. And that's where some of the online options sort of fall short, because if it's not listed, it's not listed. It's just not there. So they do have their value. And if you don't have one, you should at least buy like the basic Beckett, just they're cheap enough.
Yeah, and like I said, if you want to buy the latest one, they're available, years back. Amazon has them. You can get them on eBay. I mean, you might even get them direct through Beckett. Sometimes they sell old back issues, but whatever the case, it's just nice to have some kind of reference on the bookshelf, just something.
Absolutely. And I will say I have so much respect for Beckett, just because I remember starting collecting as a kid, and when the new Beckett came out, it was like Christmas morning.
Oh, it's the greatest thing ever.
This is before eBay really hit its stride, and before my family had a high-speed internet connection. So the old analog days of flipping through the Becketts and reading the stories they had and reading through the prices and everything.
Loved it. I used to camp out by the Christmas tree, and I would I would sleep under the tree, and I would have my Beckett next. I remember '92, the Beckett that showed Nolan Ryan in like cowboy attire. You remember that one? Back in '92. Oh, you weren't collecting in '92. You're like,
I wasn't.
You were pretty young at the time, and I
was 2 years old. But.
So you probably wouldn't have had that issue at 2. I wouldn't imagine.
No, but I remember some classic Beckett covers. I remember when Sean Green signed with the Dodgers.
Oh yeah.
Beckett put out a cover with like Jackie Robinson and Sandy Koufax and Sean Green on the cover.
They're all
It's
at
like,
equal talents. Everybody
yes,
knows that.
obviously, and all three of those individuals have gone on to be Hall of Famers. But
Right.
well, during the home run chase, tons of Mark McGwire Beckett's.
Yeah, I remember. Well, at
So yeah,
95, it was Hideo Nomo was the big one in
oh,
95, and so I mean that's expected. The new rookies come up; they're going to be featured on the front cover. I always liked. I mean, I would study those Beckett's back in the 90s, like early to
mm-hmm.
mid 90s. I would read them over and over and over, and look at every single price, every key listing, and I would start to collect the cards that I had. I would look through my collection and see if I had the cards that were worth 20 cents. They were still listed. Oh, I got that Mike Lieberthal from 1991 score, like I got to file that. Or, oh, the Carl Everett, that needs to be filed because it's listed. So I would, this is kind of how I'd process my collection was I'd go to Beckett as the benchmark, and then I would go through my collection and see what I had, what was
Mm-hmm.
valuable. So that's a really cool talking point that, there's still value in price guides for various situations. And, reference points, that's what it comes down to is just, um, although we have so much access to recorded data of sales, there's still value to printed price guides. So there you have it.
Totally. Yep.
Moving on, PSA authenticates a piece of paper signed by both Babe Ruth and Michael Jordan. What do you think about this? There's two sides to this little
Yes.
thing. What are you thinking?
I would love to know the story because, like, first of all, when I first saw this, I thought, why would you mess with something that Babe Ruth had signed? Why wouldn't
Totally.
have you just
Get something
got that
else.
authenticated and gone from there? But I suppose if you're going to have anybody else touch and manipulate that piece of paper,
It's got to be Sean Green.
it's got to be Sean Green or maybe Michael Jordan. So I guess I can see the owner's point of view. But I would also love to know how it went down. Like, did he go to an autograph signing and then he said, "Hello, Mr. Jordan, can you sign this piece of paper? Please be careful because Babe Ruth also signed it." Like,
They were both signed in person at the same time.
yeah, little known fact.
Okay, so here's the thing with me on this. Okay, I'm of the school of thought that if it's touched by Babe Ruth, signed by Babe Ruth, let it just it's retired from additional contact from other anything.
Yeah, that's
Get
what
it
I thought.
authenticated, archive it, sell it, do just whatever you got to do with it. Just keep it intact as it is. Less is more. And then have Jordan sign, like you said, another piece of paper, and then have two separate pieces of paper, and you can discuss them together. So that's more my school of thought. I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, here we are talking about it on a podcast, so it makes coverage. I think it's kind of a cool talking point.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, if I had something signed by Babe Ruth, if I had it signed by anybody else, I feel like I'm doing that piece of paper, whatever that is, a disservice. Even if it is Michael Jordan, I'm like, Michael Jordan deserves his own piece of paper.
There you go.
Babe Ruth deserves his own piece of paper. So I don't know. That's kind of just where I go. Whatever the case, if someone hooked me up with a PSA authenticated paper signed by the two of them, I wouldn't complain for a second.
Sure.
I'd be completely happy with this thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it'd look awesome in a slab. That's the other thing too, is like they're talking points.
Yeah, I mean, these are the sorts of things that I wish I was like a fly on the wall at the PSA headquarters just to see the sort of items they get to evaluate and authenticate. It must be a mind-blowing place to work sometimes because these things come through and I mean, you've never seen anything like this.
True.
And,
True.
Yeah, the story's very intriguing. I'd also love to know how Babe Ruth ended up signing it. Was it like handed down to this person? Did they buy it?
Babe Ruth signed it after Michael Jordan signed it. So here's the thing with the PSA is like if PSA sees it all, right? So
they do.
When this stuff comes through, are they like kind of desensitized by like, oh great, another Ruth Jordan auto? Like
Yeah.
that's what I think about is just, like they see so much come through the pipeline that they're processing so many items a day that I mean it's lucky we even get to see a tweet that showcases something from the office,
Mm-hmm.
because they're working so hard. That's kind of what I think is that Um, this kind of stuff is really cool, but I honestly don't know how floored people at PSA are anymore because they've seen so many things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they are. They have to just remain professional and objective, and if you're going to forge anything, it'd be a Babe Ruth, Michael Jordan piece of paper.
Yeah, I mean, those are highly forged. Those are highly forged,
Yeah.
like signatures. Highly,
Yeah.
they're right behind the Sean Green forgeries. I mean, that's just
Oh
going to be right
God.
on the. That's a problem. It's a major.
Don't get me started on the
epidemic.
Sean Green forgeries.
Sean Green's a topic of conversation. I don't know if you guys have paid attention here yet, but he's one of the key topics for this podcast.
2019 is going to be all Sean Green
It's
podcasts.
well, okay, look,
unfortunately.
I think he's got Hall of Fame written all over him. Totally.
He hit 44 home runs one year, I think.
Yeah, I think it's like right around the time when Luis Gonzalez and Brady Anderson were knocking some like 50 plus dingers. Wait, was Luis Gonzalez? Did he even have a 50?
I think he hit 56 one year.
Really?
Yeah, I'd bet $5 on that number. I don't know what year, but I want to say he
making
did.
it interesting. I'm pulling his stats up right now. Let's see here. 57. You would have lost that bet. He went from 31 home runs, and before that 26, 23, 10, and 15. So 57. Yeah, that's not suspicious or anything.
He wasn't even the league leader that year. I'm sure it was.
Well, that was 2001.
That was Bonds probably.
2001. I think Bonds started hitting him hard in 2003, wasn't it? Here we are pulling up stats from Baseball Reference because that's what we do. Okay, so yeah, 2001, that was definitely Bonds at 73 home runs. Yeah, that was the one. That was the one year that he had the most per year. You're right. You're so right.
Yeah.
You're spot on.
Could you imagine how bummed you'd be? Like, I hit 57 home runs,
And you're overshadowed by Bonds.
I must be the leader, but nope. This guy hit 73. So.
Oh man, so gnarly, so gnarly. And who was the Sean Green?
Yeah, Sean Green hit 44 for the Dodgers, I want to say.
Oh yeah, no. 49.
49
in 2001. 2001 was a strong year for hitters. I think that was also was that Brady Anderson's breakout year for home runs? Let's see, 2000. No, his was 96 at 50. Gosh, that's a lot. And then King Caminiti also had a breakout year. Look at us.
He did.
Look at us reviewing all the classics. Yeah, home runs. He hit a 40 home run year in 96 as well, along with Brady Anderson. Anywho, let's get back to it here. I
remember quick anecdote. I remember sitting in Dodger Stadium right next to the left field foul pole, and Sean Green hit a near home run. It ended up going foul right towards where I was sitting, and I had a plate of nachos in my lap.
Yeah,
and I was a dumb kid, and I just couldn't get the coordination together to try and catch it. But it hit the seat right behind me, and it ricocheted into God knows where. So I didn't get the foul ball, but that's probably as close as I've ever been to a foul ball.
Wait. Did you still get to enjoy your nachos?
Absolutely. I did not sacrifice the nachos.
That's the most important thing, man. I mean, when I was younger, the nacho with like the liquid cheese on there, that with the like fluorescent yellow orange color, and then the like little like plastic container of pickled jalapenos. I mean, that was like a really classic meal of my youth. I'd enjoy that at any instance I could, any opportunity.
Yeah, so you got to, make priorities in life, and at that time, the Sean Green foul ball was just not the priority. But I do remember that
nachos were the priority.
Nachos were the priority, but he hit this mammoth fly ball that went right over my head, and that must have been 2001, 2002, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
When he was a newly minted Dodger.
Yeah, so that was like shortly thereafter you started collecting baseball cards, was it not?
Oh, yeah. And that's why I currently have a nice collection of Sean Green cards.
That you can't even give away.
That I can't do anything with. If you're listening and you like Sean Green,
Good.
let me know. I will pay. I'll pay shipping on these bad boys.
I'll pay you to take them off of my collection.
Yes.
Take them out of my collection.
Please.
The number one 1986 Topps football set in the PSA set registry closed. It was all PSA 10s, everything. It made its way to eBay about a week, a little while back. Closed with 43 bids at just north of $79,000.
Woo!
Really amazing
Significant.
stuff.
That's
Huge.
crazy.
But to be honest, man, here's the thing, Ryan. I honestly think that is a good price. I think in 20, 30, 40 years, people are going to be like, man, if only I had just 79,000. Can you imagine just back then it was only 79,000, a whole set of this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, think about a set of, I don't know, 69 Topps, all PSA 10. And you're thinking to yourself, man, if that was only $80,000, right? Amazing. Of course, that would close at huge dollar figures now, but you got so much time that has passed, but only 33 years, and this set is condition sensitive, right? So you've got a lot of off centering. Centering is the biggest kicker, top to bottom, on this set. But because the green goes to the borders, you've got flakiness that happens along the edges and corners is very susceptible to it's very condition sensitive, this set. And so and big rookies. The set is full of excellent rookie cards. You got Jerry Rice as the key, Steve Young, Reggie White, Boomer Esiason, and
Joe Montana.
Well, yeah, you got a slew of stars in this set too. So you've got just a mess of really great cards in this set. And so and I'd be happy with 9s and 8s of a lot of those. I'm fine. I mean, Jerry Rice rookies and 8s are very affordable right now. They're very, very affordable. And so it's interesting to see this close for this price and me not being that shocked about it, knowing the significance of this set. It's also the set, the 86 Topps, is highly collected. A lot of people put this set together. My buddy Dan put this set together. And so it's so collected. And so I've seen 43 bids at just shy of 80 grand seems high, but to me it seems very realistic. And also it also seems like it's going to be considered a potential bargain at some point in the future.
Mm. Do you think that Jerry Rice is the most collectible card from the set?
It's it's the cornerstone of the set. It's like the 86 Fleer Jordan. Like the Jordan is the cornerstone of that set. The Rice is the big one, and Young is behind the Rice in terms of collectability, like what people are buying and paying a lot for. That's
sure.
Those are the two big cards. And as a fan of the Boomer Esiason, I that's the card I tend to gravitate toward. The Reggie White's another big one, but not nearly as collected as the Rice or the Young. So just want to touch on that because I think that's a significant sale.
It's huge.
In and of itself, not just in price, but of what it is. The full set PSA 10. I mean, I always think if you collect sets in PSA 10, you have to have the space to store them. That's the biggest hurdle for me. Is like one of the drawbacks for me is the reason why I don't collect PSA registry. I don't do the registry thing is because I don't have the space for it. I barely have the space for the stuff I do collect, and so I try to keep it pretty tight too. Like I try to keep pretty minimal. As a singles guy, that's just kind of how I collect. So I understand the value in doing the PSA thing. Really great investment potential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this was a big educational opportunity for me because I didn't really know a whole lot about this set. I'm still sort of learning about football cards in general because that on its own is like a whole other world separate from baseball cards. It just has its own historical context and its own kind of timeline that you have to follow.
Sure.
So the 86 Topps was something I learned to be significant thanks to this auction, really. And we've talked about this on podcasts before. It's like there are these crazy auctions that are way out of your price range. Like I'm sure most of the listeners can't afford 80 grand to drop on this sort of thing. But there's value in learning that these things exist and that they're significant. And if you're interested, they're available. And maybe you're like me and didn't know this sort of set was around and was so historically meaningful. So that's why I try to look at expensive things just because I don't want to buy them. I just want to know how much they're worth, what the market is for them. Mm-hmm. It's important, I think. Whether or not you're going to buy them, it's kind of a moot point. educate yourself on the market.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, and it's something that I like to always remind myself is that I learning and building your knowledge base. The knowledge transfer of hobby research is really important for me. As someone who tries to get an idea of full market value across the spectrum, it's really difficult to track. But I put a lot of time in on a day-to-day basis because I like to keep tabs on what's hot, what's selling, what's doing well, what's kind of cold, what's not as, what's a good time to buy. Because everybody, we've all fallen into the trap of buying at the wrong time. Buying, Bane's rookie in PSA 9 and 10 right now is a bad time to do that. But like just a month ago, they were like $15-20 for nines, cheap. Now their nines are like hundreds. It's just $200 for a nine. It's just so weird to me. So it's not weird. It's predictable. Because like you see a lot of eyeballs on something, you're going to find people talking about it and they're going to go and search it and they're going to buy it. And so it draws traffic to those items during those times. But regardless if you're in the market to buy or not, it's good to know what is doing well, even if you're not collecting. So I don't collect a lot of football, but I like football cards. I plan to buy more of them in my life, but they're just right now kind of down the priority. But I'm aware of a lot of the large key cards from the 70s and 80s and even back, and so in 90s too. And so I'm aware of what's hot. I know I'm aware of the certain cards, but I've only because I've spent time investigating the market on what's what. Because when I see showcase after showcase featuring the same football card, I'm like, okay, well that has to be significant. Let's figure out why. And so I'll go online and see like what's hot, what's selling, which cards are the popular, which ones are important, whatever. The 86 Topps football set I've known about since, I probably became aware of this set in '94 when I was living in Virginia for a year, and I went to my buddy's house, Casey, and his older brother had stacks of 86 football on his bedside mantle. And I was like, man, those look old. What are they? It's like 86 Topps. I was like, wow. And that's when I first had exposure to the Reggie White, and I got to know the classic white lined like football pattern that they have on the borders. A really classic design of this set. I really just like the colors. They're great. But the benefit is the knowledge transfer, getting to know something that you don't necessarily collect.
Totally.
Like I've been doing a little bit of coin research lately. Before I got into baseball cards in 1988, I collected coins and stamps. And so that's just something on the side I like to learn about, even though I don't collect those things anymore. But just to know kind of what's hot, what's popular. I mean, I just like collectibles, so I just kind of focus on, what's being, what's selling. And one of the bigger auction houses online sold a Napoleon Bonaparte signed letter. I thought that was cool.
Oh, moly.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool stuff. You don't see that every day, right? So, or like Michael Jackson's socks, kind of like really obscure things to collect, but they're collectible. And so just becoming aware of stuff is, I think, important just for, knowing. It's like when you go to college, you have to take a bunch of core classes, but it makes you more well-rounded. You like have talking points and you can just think about things in a different way. I think about that in the hobby too. When you're not collecting your primary, you just go out and kind of research something else for a while just to get to know, Napoleon Bonaparte signature on a letter, or like I was saying, like stuff that Michael Jackson was wearing on tour, like interesting, weird, kind of obscure side topics. So I just want to touch on that. I think this is kind of one of those things. It's like, oh, that's cool. Now you know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't hurt to just kind of peruse eBay or any other like online auction house and see what's around. Even if you're not going to buy anything, just kind of see what's available. If you're into basketball, maybe research some hockey cards. If you're into football, maybe research some baseball cards. It's like the hobby really has no end to how much you can learn. And I found a lot of interesting tidbits of historical information just from kind of going outside of my comfort zone and looking at sports cards that I don't really want to buy, but I'm just sort of curious about.
Yeah, the other piece of that too is that it doesn't have to just revolve around sports either. There's a large like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering arm there's a lot of collectible cards in those too. Some people don't take that stuff seriously, but they're trading cards just like baseball cards.
Ooh, the Pokemon stuff, that could be like a potential whole other podcast topic, because
totally
we could
cover that.
Yeah, those have really jumped off
They have.
recently.
I think the Pokemon Go app kind of brought interest back to the cards because they kind of fell off for a while, and Yu-Gi-Oh
Yeah.
sort of like took over, and then now Pokemon's back in the market as like a category leader in that realm.
Hmm.
I don't know. I wouldn't compare Pokemon to Magic the Gathering because Magic I think is the pinnacle of the RPG trading card kind of category, and everything kind of came after it,
Sure.
and
Yeah, they've been
so
around longer, and
way longer, and
yeah.
so it's we might discuss this in a future podcast because I think there's some talking points in here, kind of talking about maybe some of the bigger cards, what to look for, this kind of thing. There's some content that we could discuss, but that aside, maybe that for another time. That covers this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Ryan, do you have any final thoughts?
I'm just bundled up here in cold California, waiting for spring training to start.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's all I have for now.
All right. Thanks for joining me, Ryan. I appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to the Radicards podcast and radicards.com. I'm your host, Patrick Greeno, and until next time, enjoy collecting. If you like this content, please subscribe. Thank you. Enjoy collecting.